If tomorrow starts without me, there's something you should know. While I hold you close, never let you go.
Hello and welcome to The Broken Pack, a podcast focused on giving adult survivors of sibling loss a platform to share their stories and to be heard, something that many sibling loss survivors state that they never have had. Sibling loss is misunderstood. The Broken Pack exists to change that and to support survivors. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Dean. Today, in our first episode, I talk with Dr. Jen Kilgore, a sister, a mom, a daughter, a wife, a naturopathic doctor, and a sibling loss survivor. You will hear her story of loss, her challenges, where she is on her healing journey, and a little about her late brother, Jimmy. We recorded this interview late in the summer of last year, but today, the release date, January 11th, is Jimmy's birthday, which is undoubtedly a difficult day for Jen and all of their family. So sending warm thoughts and love to them. Here's my conversation with her.
Second guessing, 'cause you never know, you just never know.
Thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor. I have a clinic in Nashua, New Hampshire, and my husband is mostly home with my kids right now. His name is David, and we have two sons, Gabriel and Gavin. Gavin is just three in a few months, and Gabriel is about to turn 5. A lot going on at the moment, but all exciting.
Awesome. As you know, we're here to talk about, unfortunately, sibling loss, which you and I have both experienced. But today I wanted to hear your story. Before we get there, though, what would you want me and our listeners to know about your brother before we talk about the loss?
My brother was the kind of person that when he was diagnosed, the doctor that had to come in to tell him they had found a tumor in his heart, it just was out of nowhere. And she came in, and when she finished explaining what was going on, very first words out of his mouth were, "That must have been really hard for you to come in here and tell me that." And this is a 32-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Jimmy was his whole life. He thought of everybody else before himself. And his good work on this earth was to be a really amazing support for a lot of people.
So even in that moment of life-changing information, he was putting the doctor first. That does say a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. He struggled from the time he was young with addiction and was introduced to pretty dark side of the world very, very young. And that just came out of nowhere. And so the family helped. We all helped. We were very, very close, and we all participated in his recovery in different ways and different times. But he struggled for 9 years before he really found his rock bottom, and he almost died. And he was very aware of that every moment of his life after that moment, and he called them borrowed moments. And he grew into a carpenter and a miner. He would dig out beautiful gemstones from the earth and find rose quartz and aquamarine and spend hours on the mountains and in the rivers. He built beautiful homes and carved wood, and he used those skills all the way through till the end. And just was very creative and an artist, and did build a career and had a strong recovery from his addiction, and was more than 12 years clean when he was diagnosed, and he stayed off pain medication until his last 6 months. It was a big struggle for him, actually. And he did decide to take some help after recovering from using things like that to escape pain. So he'd been on a pretty big spiritual journey throughout his lifetime, and that came through all the way after diagnosis and things like that. And he lived a pretty amazing life. He had a little girl before he passed. It's a part of the whole story, so I'll wait to get too much into that. But he does have a little girl, Gwyneth Rose. I'm very blessed to be within an hour of, and I see her pretty regularly. He was engaged when he died, and she's still a pretty big part of the family.
It sounds like you were pretty close to him.
Yeah, very close. We were about 2.5 years apart, and we all went through some pretty hard things together when we were young. We bonded through that, and he and I had great friendship in our young adult years. I felt like after his diagnosis, between his diagnosis and his passing, he gave me a glimpse of what our relationship would have been for the next 30 years. And I got to satisfy a lot of that because he was so present.
Were you older or younger?
I'm older. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm the oldest. He's the middle. And we have a younger sister, Julia, who's about 5 years younger than me.
Okay. How's your relationship with her?
Good. A little bit distant. We're very different. So we have ways that we're very close and ways that we're very distant. And probably part of the story we'll tell today, I think, too, because I do think that Jimmy passing has changed a lot of things. And we've both had really different experiences since his passing.
For sure. If you're okay with sharing whatever you feel comfortable with about the loss, here to listen and support you.
Yeah, I hope it's okay if I start with, I was finishing medical school at the time. This is like a few months before his initial diagnosis. And I was at that point completing a doctorate. I had clinical board to sit for and a couple months to prep for that exclusively, like after graduation. I was about 4 days into that study, and I had my calendar up on the wall with my board study partner, and we had every day mapped out all the way until the end. We were going to take a break and then go test. And I got a call, and I just was literally taken out of a study session. And my brother had some kind of incident where kind of lost control of bodily functions and had passed out, and it was out of nowhere, and there was no reason for it at the time. Paramedics were called, and he was taken in emergently. And they did a CT of his abdomen because he'd been vomiting and some things. And in the CT of his belly, they caught a glimpse of his heart, which is really, really abnormal. So he right away was transferred to a hospital that could work up a heart problem to figure out why the heart is so enlarged that you could see it on a CT of an abdomen where it doesn't belong. And they found liters of hemorrhagic fluid around his heart. And he was, over the course of like maybe 3 days, diagnosed with a tumor in his right atrium. And what we remember exactly when we found out what the tumor was, but it's an angiosarcoma of the heart. It's a very rare tumor it's an orphan cancer, but it is killing young men all over the world. And it's just something that you don't know about until you know about. They don't teach in medical school, even it's not in the books or anything. And
so it's a pretty rare cancer.
Rare cancer, very, very aggressive cancer, very aggressive cancer. Wasn't expected to live very long. So my family called to say, we need you to come home. We got to figure out what we're all going to do. So I did. I came home. We went in and out of Boston and organized oncology visits and cardiology visits and got all the specialists on board and coordinated that needed to be and figured out what initial approaches we would take. And because I was on board, I also elicited help from a board certified oncologist in my field, who was a naturopath, but he has an additional board certification for oncology. And he's right outside of Boston and Lexington. And we went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and everyone was just really in the initial whirlwind of it all and not thinking very clearly. And one of the most impressive things was we went to this naturopath and he explained things so differently, and he took time in a way that was different. And it's why I do what I do. But anyways, Jimmy's experience was really good. And he came out feeling like, he just looked at me, he said, "Jenny, I finally feel like I know what's going on with my body and I know what I want to do." And he went forward with treatment plan. And I went back to life. I had been studying for board exams in the basement of a library in between all those things that were happening, and just figure I can't pass my boards while life is happening. I just have to retake them. Like, that's a part of life, right? So I did, and I got through that. And I honestly, that was the first time I felt a little bit of this sibling stuff too, because I felt a lot of pressure. It would be hard on them if I failed and I showed up for them. And so I got there, and then I flew a lot. I came home often while I was opening practice and getting my first go at running a clinic started. And that was supportive. it probably wasn't enough, but it was supportive. And because we did such a comprehensive approach and we raised a lot of money, Jimmy did do a GoFundMe and a lot of community support. And we were able to afford a lot of the things that the naturopath wanted him to do, like the extra supplementation and things insurance doesn't help with, and advanced testing, which insurance doesn't help with, and all kinds of things. So he actually got through and he went into remission. It was amazing. It took, I want to say, forgive, the timeline is really, really foggy, but maybe a year, 13 months, something like that, of chemo, radiation, and taking 70 different pills a day, doing all kinds of things with supplements and with very comprehensive approach. And it just shrunk and they couldn't operate on it. So it's dunculated into this nothing. And everyone was really happy with that. So he went back to life. And he was building houses with a carpenter, or an architect rather, that he was a carpenter for an architect that had mentored him a lot in maturing after his addiction and coming into his adulthood. And he got to put up a house on all kinds of things that fall. And around Thanksgiving, he and Carla announced that they were pregnant. Which was cool. He had done some preservation of his sperm, assuming if he got through this after radiation and things, you never know. So that was a surprise. And they were very happy. This is where it's going to get hard for me to tell, but
Yeah. Take your time.
about 7 weeks after that, I got pregnant. That was a big surprise. I've been trying for 10 years without doing anything horribly aggressive. So just after the holidays, I announced I was pregnant. And at the same time, there was an insurance hiccup, like something with his Mass Health. We didn't make a lot of money, neither of them did. So they were on state insurance, whatever. There was just some paper. And he was being scanned every 3 months because, again, this is an extremely aggressive cancer. So they delayed a scan that should have been done in January to fix the insurance problem. And when they got to him in March, it was like really bad. And a few things that happened, right? As I mentioned, he got through it. Like he kicked that cancerous butt and went back to life. And it was like $4,000 a month to do the things that insurance wouldn't cover that got him there. And that we all do fine. We're not of huge wealth. So he stopped asking. Then this is for me personally where I feel the biggest fail, because it's where I know I lost him. Those were the months I should have pushed the hardest. And those are the months where we all should have been hemorrhaging anything we had to give. And instead, we all let him go back to life, and we didn't. And so we didn't keep up with a lot of things that maybe could have kept that from being such a problem. But anyways, it just was. So that's how it went. And by the time he got back for his scan and figured out what was going on, and I'm not even sure what beat what. Was it the cancer that came back first, or was it damage to the lungs from the radiation? Because they did do radiation to the right atrium, which is quite dangerous. And he was dealing with pericarditis and all kinds of other things. It's not like things were perfect after all of that. It was hard. So he started building up fluid in his lungs, and his body was decompensating. So the list of medications he was on was 3-4 times. He called me in March, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was like, he's pregnant and I'm pregnant, and it was time to come. And I was out in Arizona. I don't know if I mentioned that. Like, I had gone away. So I was across the country while this was happening. My family's in New England. They always where I'd been until that time. And after 6 years, within less than a week's time, I decided to close my practice. And I just happened to be at a point where it was okay to exit care with my current patients. And the people that needed help for a time period, my husband stayed behind, closed the clinic a little bit more slowly, gave everybody notice, and we passed off care. And I took my essentials with me. My sister flew out, and we drove home on a weekend with me. I was 5 months pregnant, and I stayed with my parents until my husband got there 4 or 5 weeks later. And we reestablished our clinic and our life here in New Hampshire. And I remember a few days after I arrived, Jimmy came to my parents' like front porch where we'll all hang out and socialize a little bit. And he just had this look in his face and he's like, I feel like you got here just in time. And right away we had to figure out, like, he had developed a cough really bad. And at the same time, his lungs are filling up with fluid. So everyone's assuming it's one thing's another thing and this and that. He had all these heart meds they'd started. And so he was on an ACE inhibitor. And ACE inhibitors cause a cough in a certain percentage of people, right? Most doctors know that. So one considered that possibility, that that's why the cough was getting so bad so quick, because they just started an ACE inhibitor a month ago. So right away we caught the ACE inhibitor he was having a side effect. So they switched his heart meds and he stopped coughing and made things a little bit less confusing. And it was great to be able to figure that out and help. I did attend a lot of his visits. And just to put things in perspective, my husband and I were just starting practice, and that was paying in practice and our lives. Like we weren't living on a lot and we didn't have the money to move. We went into debt to do that. And we'd just gone into debt to open the practice and we were not in a great position. I was 5 months pregnant. I came to a new place. Yes, I had old business because I worked here before and I have people that have followed me through my education and journey. So I started and I had business right away and I was figuring out how to support and where my boundaries were. Because the other thing that started to happen is like he needed treatment and we have family members that know about the things I'm trained in and everyone wanted me to treat him, wanted me to give him IVs. They wanted me to do UV blood irradiation. I had just started practice. I didn't have nurses working for me. I wasn't set up for any. Yes, I trained and certified, but I hadn't even really done it. I was just starting. And so I had to just navigate that. So I took him to the best people I knew and I helped him navigate the care, but I didn't take a lot of it on. And then here, as I'm telling you this story, I'm like also like very aware, like what was happening for me is I was pregnant and there wasn't really much room in my life for that. And I was really having a hard time and didn't feel like that was allowed. So I kept it together until about August, and his daughter was born in August 10th. And he was pretty full-time in Boston in the oncology unit. At that point, he was dying. No one wanted to allow or acknowledge that.
Did you acknowledge that?
I gave him permission at some point. No one was doing that either, his doctors even. I went in at one point and around that time it was like he couldn't get his needs met because everyone was in denial. He wasn't getting hospice care. We were making up for that. So my sister moved home from New York. I had moved from Arizona back. We were all helping, my mother, my sister and I, just me, and then Carla has a big family too. So their refrigerator was overfilled all the time and we were doing everything we could. But also she was pregnant and wanted some normalcy and it was almost impossible.
It sounds like neither of you could enjoy the pregnancy journey.
It was just really hard. It was just really, really hard. And I'm having this stress of I support my family. My husband worked when he got here until I became so stressed and overwhelmed and depleted that I had to ask him to stay home and just support things full time because I did lean into work. I'm good at that. I hid there. And so Gwen came. Jimmy did get to see her born and was very sick. And in his last weeks, he passed September 27, 2 days after my dad's birthday. He went in on my dad's birthday and probably was ready to die, lungs filling with fluid constantly. And the drains they put in caused nerve pain that never went away. And it was very, very, very hard. He took pain medication. And for Jimmy, he had recovered from addiction. It was no one in the family, I don't think, understood that the same way. Maybe my dad and I a little bit. And I know my mom and my sister really tried, but it's really, really hard to, like every appointment, he had to say no because everyone wanted to give him things. And he's no, that's not something. He set that boundary and to give that up at the end, I think that's really when we lost him. That's when I saw him start to transition. I knew he was probably not there was nothing that really could turn it around. It was just inevitable. And I wanted him to have what he needed in his last days. He had 12 doctors that all have really strong opinions, and they didn't coordinate very well. So we asked for a big meeting with all of them, and everyone attended, everyone but his radiologist. And I actually ended up leading the meeting because it just needed to happen. And I asked them to talk to the family about the different directions that we could take as far as getting him into hospice and what that could look like at different levels, and just to help bridge that because the family really needed that. They were really grateful that I was there because they did a very good job facilitating. And to me, it felt like the win I needed to be able to have my baby, regardless of what was happening. And this is like early August.
What year was this?
2017.
Okay.
5 years ago. And we did it. And everybody was okay. They understood. And I felt like I did what I needed to do. It was good. And not 12 hours later, the one doctor that didn't attend the meeting called with some miracle opportunity to do some new technique and undid everything. It was really inappropriate, but it happened. And everyone looked at me. I was the one who was supposed to force him to make the decision and have the conversation about doing this procedure. I was the one who was asked if it was the right thing. And I got really mad, to be honest. I got outwardly, I got really, really mad.
That's a lot of responsibility for a family member.
Yeah, and I didn't agree to be that he should have done the radiation. I think that's what he killed. So I had very different opinions, but it wasn't. I also had very good boundaries with my brother. It had to be what he could live with, not what I could live with. So just like I counsel my patients, that's how I did that. And at that point, it was hard because I was kind of like, it just felt like too hard of a question to ask. And I guess that was too hard of a question. But to say no a little bit. And yet I still found myself being a bit of, went and had the conversation and made sure he had informed consent and helped him figure out all the little things that it seemed like weren't happening. And he did do the procedure. And I don't know if he wanted to do it or if he just felt like he had to. So he tried everything, but that's when he died within days of that procedure. So whether that was a good idea and he would have had more time with his newborn or not, it doesn't matter. It's how it happened. And there were a lot of days in Boston at the end. So I was preparing for a baby. I had no money, no time. For me, to be honest, I was getting ready to completely lose it. And in August, I remember laying down and feeling more grief than I'd ever felt in my whole life about anything. And I was pregnant, so I remember also feeling guilty. I feel like,
right.
And then he died, and I hadn't had my baby yet. Okay, so I was supposed to be due September 19th, I think. Yeah, September 19th. Dad's birthday's the 25th. Jimmy went in emergently and clearly for his final time. And he looked at my dad and he said, "I'm not dying on your birthday." And then he hung on for 2 days. And then he died. And I was getting more and more pregnant, and I'm now past my due date. My doctors are wondering, am I going to be able to get there? But you don't need to induce this and that. And we're working on schedules and times for that, which was not my birth plan or my preference, but it wasn't happening. And I went into Boston every day until the day he died. And then I saw him that night. I knew we all should have stayed if we wanted to be with him when he died, and we didn't. And he died. And everyone else went back in again that morning. And I just said, I'm good. I'm done. And I went into I've got to have my baby. And then I still didn't. I don't remember how that went, to be honest. I must have for 5 days still not had a baby. And everyone was trying to plan services and this and that. And I'm sitting there, you've got to put it off. I have to have a baby. And I had to fight for that. That was maybe like the most invisible I felt through the whole thing. So I went into labor hours before my induction, and I had Gabriel, and I was in the hospital for 2 days, and I was at my brother's services 5 days after his birth. I was swollen and I was in so much pain and I wasn't ready, but that's when it happened. And we had 300 people show up, family from everywhere, and a couple of days of all of that commotion. And then my sister went away for a month, and I had just moved my practice across the country and built up enough momentum to pay for the basic things one needs in life. And so I went right back to work. I started phone consults 2 weeks later, and I started working 4 weeks later. And then I got pregnant 9 months after that and ended up in a postpartum depletion state. That's something I still struggle with up on and off. And everyone else went back to their thing. And, the pandemic happened, like a lot happened. It was 2017. So by the time my second baby came, the world changed.
Yeah.
And that was a whole nother story of what happened with family and our ability to be connected for certain times and things.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I know that was hard for you to share some of that. You hinted at it. It sounded like there was this anticipatory time where you knew and you were grieving. But I heard a hint of guilt during that period. Do you want to talk more about what that felt like as you were anticipating his death?
After he died, I grew a lot, like in my practice and my doctorship. And I now do on the daily, easily, confidently, the things that he needed from me, the way that and from everything from my confidence in my consulting to my procedures. And he wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid of me doing anything that I could. Like, he was willing to, he just was open and had none of that stuff that's attached. And I didn't know how to manage that boundary. It was too much for me. Now I probably could. I could certainly get someone to supervise that at my clinic and set him up with a nurse and at least facilitate it in a way that makes a lot more sense. Then I really couldn't. And there was that guilt. And then there was also that guilt of my beliefs and how I look at things I'm like, my paradigm of all this is just so different. But I was young in my doctorship of that, but I just didn't know how to navigate having such different feelings against such strong resistance, which is what I felt like I was up against. Really, I was so desperate for there to be a better solution or a better answer, but didn't really want to hear about that or commit. I don't know. There was so much fear mixed with it. It just made it really hard. So I put everything on the table. I put all the things on the table. What I know now is I didn't do it early enough. I wasn't clear in the ways I should have been clear about, now that you got here, this is what you do. So you stay there. And I left that up to his team, and that didn't happen. And that's where a big part of my guilt came from, because I missed that opportunity to do something he really wanted to do, which was just to maintain that state of health that he'd earned. And then I just have this philanthropic heart that never should have been about money. I hate that. I hate that in my clinic. I hate that. One day I'm going to make my millions and it's all scholars. It'll be great.
I hear you. How supported did you feel by your family as you were grieving, either before his death or right after? Because I also heard you say you jumped right into work.
Yeah. Before, I felt like there was support. It was really, but we were all really aware, all extremities of life were having Carl and Jen were having babies. Like, just wonderful. And it was wonderful. And we spent a lot of time in the time after he passed. We were together a lot and we did support. And did I feel that way? No, I still felt like I was supporting more than I was getting support, but I'm sure there was a lot of both. I know that. Everyone's intentions were for that. My personal struggle was that I experienced, at first it looked like postpartum depression or anxiety or some blend of that. And it really became a depletion. Like, it makes sense that happened to me. And I felt really unsupported when that started happening to me. I couldn't quite communicate what I needed. And I don't know if I didn't allow it or didn't ask for it or it wasn't available, to be honest. But now that I look back, but at the time it felt like it was being withheld. So it did feel like the way that we'd come together to support Jimmy and Carla in their bringing of the baby and allowing him to go through the passing and all the things that happened, I just didn't get that same thing after. And I don't know what that was about. If that's about them or me. It's just that how it definitely felt like I was more alone than starting from about 30 days after my son was born. Like, my sister forget where she went away for a month and did her thing so she could do that and then get back to life. And I felt like I didn't get to do that at all. I had a baby and then I had a more him that I was.
Mhm. What would you have wanted to be different, reflecting back, or even then?
I would have taken a year off. I would have been able to afford to take a year off and live on it. My husband just doesn't make near as much money as I do, which is fine, but that was a reality. We couldn't. Hard to say that though, because I'm also a doctor that has a beautiful practice now, and that would have completely changed the momentum and the trajectory. Maybe I would have found someone to come live with me that could have helped us so that we could have had more space from the beginning to have time every day together. I'm still looking for that person. Like we talk about it all the time. That's probably the thing that we should do is bring someone in to help us, because there's a lot that been just put off. It's a 5-year anniversary right now. This is a really tough time. It was the year for me with all of this, and it's just noticeable. We still don't have a lot of space. We have 2 little ones, which is beautiful and all consuming. And this business that is also all consuming. So to find space to do probably what we need to do, like I have someone that could help more. Like it's just, I never really had that. Like my sister couldn't just come over and watch the kids for a few hours. My parents couldn't really do that either. It was, we didn't leave our kids with we didn't have anyone to leave our kids with. And so I built more of the community, which happened through my work. Now I have more help that way. And I do have a nanny that comes a couple of days a week, but it was hard to find places to get support, even to talk about it. I still don't have that. Honestly, this is the second time I've ever tried to tell any part of this story out loud, because I've been going through it and figuring it out. I don't share a whole lot about that stuff. I'm on like currently processing. So yes, some of that shows up because I'm a pretty transparent person, but I also, it's just hard to even reconcile what it, and bring it out. Yeah. A lot hasn't been said or talked about. Just reading something I read that you read is like, it felt like it normalized a few things that just been aware of, been happening, but I don't have friends I could talk about that with. So yeah.
It is 80 to 80% of the world has siblings. So this isn't a unique experience. However, there's not a lot of support. And that's what I'm trying to build here. Yeah. And this was the first start. Sharing your story, probably giving you that outlet. But what else would you want even now because it sounds like you've held on to a lot of that and not had even support from the people that are closest to you.
Yeah. And I suppose some of it is as it comes out, I get really afraid I'm going to step on the toes of somebody else's process or grief in the family. So some of it feels like, it sounds silly to say it this way, but maybe an embarrassment of the expression or something. Like it's just, a community space where it's sort of like some of the other group experiences. It when you're with a group that's like-minded and that has a shared experience that way or a shared goal, it does get easier to open up and be vulnerable without that fear. And there's more purpose to it. Yeah, there's probably a lot of places that I could reach out and share and talk, but I don't know that I found those communities. So I love the idea of a community space, something where that's what we come together on is this shared experience. And that's a bond. With the family, it's a little different. We do have this shared loss, but our experiences of that loss are so unique. It's hard for us to talk about that.
Because your roles and your relationships with him are all very different.
Yes.
That's the core of what I'm trying to create as a community. So hopefully keep you posted on that. You have another sibling. You said your experience has been very different than hers. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. At first, we were really pretty connected and pretty open about it all. And we'd come together when one of us needed that. And then with the pandemic and some of the distancing there, I felt like we as a family had a really hard time coming together. Like there was something that everyone always told me I was the heart, because I've left a couple of times. I did university in Colorado. I've moved around a little bit. But when Jimmy died, it did feel like there was some piece of something, like a glue, there was something that wasn't it was a little harder for us. And my sister her boundaries are different. And her life is different. And when I was leaning into being really available, there was just like, it's 3-hour visits once a month or whatever. There wasn't like, I wanted to go from the space that we'd been in before Jimmy died, where we were all there. We all did whatever we want. Jimmy could call me at 8:00 in the morning and I would cancel 10 appointments if I had to and reschedule and be with him. And then none of that transferred forward. Just went back to that like way people usually are. And in a time for me when I really, really, really needed someone to be there that way for me. And like to not get that, I think, and then to be in the depletion state, I had a problem with everybody for a long time to the point that I almost burned those relationships up. I ended up estranged from her last year and didn't take my family to Thanksgiving. We had a huge thing over it. We got in our first fight ever. I've never exchanged words with her that way. And it was terrible. And then we had months of trying to figure out how to even recover it. And I don't know that it'll ever really be the same. And again, this is the first time I'm saying that out loud, but something about it just, we didn't come together to, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's just, again, about me and my journey and about what I went through and how that affected my experience of the first 5 years after his loss, or if that's something more connected to the worldly events or other things. I'm sure it's all part of it.
Yeah.
I'm in a very, very, it's very different. And I miss my brother.
Yeah.
I think I miss that. Like we were really good friends as kids. We were friends, friends as young adults. We had, he and my relationship with my sister for both of us was always a little bit different. And she just has different boundaries than we do. And it's just different. So the dynamic has changed.
Yeah. Do you feel supported now in the current day?
I'm working on it. No, but I have lots of people who are keeping me accountable to working on it. Yeah, working on it. My business is growing and my work here is a little bit bigger than what I'm doing right now. And so I'm really focused on that. And because of what it was like for me during the acute phases of grief and the very beginning of building my practice, I don't want to say it this way, but I'm going to, because it's just not coming out. I lost a lot of my kids and had a lot of hard times. And I'm now not that woman. I'm much stronger and I'm much more clear. And I'm still processing. Just doing this podcast was today. I had a whole lot of different feelings come up in the hours before, and I didn't expect that. And then I'm like, of course that happens. But it still hits me like a tidal wave, like it did when you first left. But I'm doing better at recognizing where I need to depend on myself and where I need to invite support into my life. So I have a huge amount of support compared to 2 years ago, a huge amount of support compared to even a year ago. And I'm always putting that out there now. I'm over the feeling like I need to do it all myself and just trying to find the right places to allow people to help. And that's a journey. But so things are a lot better than they were 3 years ago. And,
of course.
It's ongoing. Yeah.
Well, and the anniversaries are, first, that I'm a psychologist. So of course I'm going to ask a couple questions about that, but we know the anniversaries of grief and loss are harder. With this being the fifth one, you did mention that's
So I know, and I have that thing that is I want to resist that. Like I want that not to be true.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it.
So how do you prepare as like
they'd be like, so are we going to talk about the fact in 5 years? Because it's been 5 years, and it's really big, and it's been really big, and it's been really, really big.
Do you mark the anniversary in a certain way?
We do. We go. So when he was dying, he wanted to go to the mountains and he didn't want to spend his time. So he would check himself out against medical advice when he felt like it. And his nurses were quite supportive of that because everyone knew he was dying. He had to do all the things he wanted to do. And we all did as much of that as possible. Going up north, it's a 2-3 hour drive. It was very hard. He's really sick, but we did it. And we'd all figure that out. And I was taking days off the books constantly. I'm accommodating as much as I can. And I'm pregnant. I'm very, very pregnant. And pregnancy was not good for me. I was very sick, all kinds of things. So I did as much of that as possible. But I didn't do this one trip. The last trip he did, it was in September. It must have been a couple of weeks before he died. And everyone else went and they all got a big hotel, and it's a big deal. My dad never leaves the house ever for anything, even a wedding, and he did it. And they all have this memory. And so the next year we started a tradition that we all go up and get a place and stay and do this river thing. And my sister hasn't participated, but his fiance and his little girl go up, and my husband and my family, we go up, and my mother goes up. And my dad doesn't usually do it, but it's at least the four of us that we do. And we get a really nice Airbnb up in like Waterville Valley, and we do mining one day, and then we go to the Kankamangas to one of his like favorite spots and have a river day. And so we put lots of his stones and pictures out, and he was an artist and a crafter. So we bring all kinds of things and let the kids play with stuff and have a couple really nice days up there and do really beautiful sit by the pool and let the kids play. And the three of my mom, Carla, and I have just come to love it. So this year I got a really nice place, and we're doing that at the end of the month, and I'm really excited about it.
It sounds like a lovely tribute to him.
Yeah.
Captures his essence in a lot of way from what you've said. So the psychologist question I have for you, I'm not going to do therapy with you, I promise. But the question I have is, did you seek counseling or support from a mental health professional?
I did. I was struggling, and it mostly came out through the postpartum problems I was having and seeing my pediatrician and knowing I was not, like, I needed help coping. She recommended a social worker that was right there in the hospital. My pediatrician had twins prematurely, same time I had my son prematurely. We had a very good relationship. At any rate, I forget exactly when I brought her on board, but when things started to get really dark for me and I wasn't coping, I did start to see someone. I saw her a lot. There was one point when I did need a prescriber, and she was wonderful at just helping me bridge to that and get over any shame or guilt around needing something to get through a time that was extremely hard. It was when I was also expanding my practice. I took on 2,000 square feet and started hiring, and it was a really big growth time, and I was in a really bad place, and it was really hard to make risky decisions in the space I was in. So I did accept some help from a prescriber for a short time and did things that weren't meant to be long-term or forever, and in a way that worked for me. And I was really blessed that the prescriber was willing to work with me in a really natural way. And some of the things I did through really high dose nutritional IV that was very targeted to accommodate treatment in ways that we differed in what the solution should be. And that was agreed. And then I had a nurse supervise it. And that was a good solution. And it was supported by a provider, which I liked. I don't love to doctor myself, but I do like to do things without medications that aren't needed. And then it's just been a journey since then. Right now, I'm not in weekly counseling, but on and off, like I know that's there. And my husband and I have someone we work with as well that is there for either of us individually or together. We know we need to do more of that. He and I have had a very hard time establishing and renegotiating since these changes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just changed.
Yeah.
And we're not quite the same people on this side of it. And so we do feel that, like, we don't know exactly how to do that, but we're looking for the right person to, because we if that happens, we'll probably be in a much better place. And we know
makes sense.
That this has affected us in ways we haven't really had support to correct.
Do you feel that your providers understood sibling loss?
Not really.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
No, I had to go to, actually, and I didn't mention this part, but I acutely went on a sort of, wasn't my pediatrician, it was my OB sent me to someone, and she completely misunderstood what was going on. And I have a doctorate. I'm not an idiot when it comes to all this stuff. So I recognized right away it wasn't going to be a good fit. And I went to 3 appointments, and it honestly, at the time, I was in such a fragile place. I felt like it did more harm than good. That's another thing with this project you're doing that is so needed, is that there was no bridge or understanding or anyone to properly case manage or triage what was going on for me, even though, and I honestly, I felt mad at my husband for a lot. I'm like, look, everyone kind of knew I lost my my brother the week I had the baby, and they were aware of that. And I did have a doctor reach out and say, how you doing one time. But to be honest, there was this part of me that felt so stuck behind the curtain in a place I couldn't get out of. And I felt like, how was there no one for him to call? How was there no, and I don't mean to say it that way because it wasn't his job to do that, but it also felt like, I don't know, we probably could have figured a lot more out if we did have support that was more targeted for our situation and had a place that to point to. I don't think everyone understands. So I got to someone good. The provider that knew me best, who was my pediatrician, helped me find the right person, but I might not have gone back. I had such a bad experience the first time. She didn't have hold space for what I was going through. And that made it worse, to be honest.
Right. Your situation is probably more complicated because it sounds like had postpartum depression and depletion on top of grief and loss and guilt. So is there anything that I didn't ask you about or that we didn't talk about that you wanted to share or comment on?
The only thing that comes up is just, you asked me about the guilt earlier, and he has a little girl now who's 5. We didn't do videos for her because of that denial that he was dying and whatever else kept us from doing that. I do that for my kids. Every week I make a video. Just started that this quarter, but it's been really nice. I was at the beach yesterday. I took a nice video of them and I just told them a story about her, sort of something about her life. And I guess I also had some questions for him. Not everybody gets time for that kind of thing. I think your brother was taken very quickly, if I remember correctly. But
he was, yeah.
I did have time. So I have guilt around that. Like, I did have time and I didn't ask him all that. My sister too. One day within a few months of him dying, called us all emergently, like, please, can we all get together? I'm having a really hard time. We all got together. And it was about that. It was like, I didn't say or ask the things I needed to say or ask. And we also will do it now anyways, just talk to him. But that was something I missed. I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't right to ask what I wanted to add, but there are lingering things that I didn't resolve.
Sounds like that's a lot of regret.
Yeah. Yeah. The addiction it took a lot of years in counseling to get through that. Like, it's a lot of my counseling in my 20s was reconciling a lot of the things we went through with Jimmy during his years when he was in trouble and how I reacted and responded to that. I went through years of my life where I overgifted him, like obsessively. I couldn't help it. It's like how it manifested. For a couple of years of counseling, I let that go one day. Someone asked a really good question. I don't remember.
Fair. Let's end on a different note. I wonder if you wanted to share your favorite memory of Jimmy.
That's a great question. Favorite moment of Jimmy. When we were little, we played in the woods all the time. And we always lived on expansive properties with a lot of acreage around. So there's usually a pond somewhere. And we would muck around the ponds. And we collected all these cinder blocks. And next to the pond made like a cinder block tower with little cubbies. And we would collect treasure from the woods and put different little fungus and funny little things we'd find in the cubbies. And we'd set up shop and we'd play entrepreneurs. My family, my parents own businesses. So I guess that was like a thing from whatever. And I just remember tromping through the woods with him, finding these really cool mushrooms that, just little funny things like that. But just there's one day and specifically, I remember we were just out there, and that's a really good memory.
Sounds lovely. Thank you for sharing and for helping me start on this journey. Thank you so much for listening. Our theme song was written by Joe Millwood and Brian Dean and was performed by Joe Millwood. If you would like more information on The Broken Pack, go to our website, thebrokenpack.com. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter, Wild Grief, to learn about opportunities and receive exclusive information and grieving tips for subscribers. Information on that, our social media, and on our guests can be found in the show notes wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow, subscribe, and share. Thanks again.
You're second guessing, or you never know, you just never know.